Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something absolutely fascinating: aliens, Area 51, and body language. For decades, the whole debate around Bob Lazar has been completely tangled up in things like the physics of space travel, Element 115, and secret military bases. But you know what? Today, we're putting all of that aside. Instead, we're taking some of the most sensational claims in modern history and throwing them right under the cold, clinical microscope of forensic psychology. We're going straight to the source material from a prominent clinical and forensic psychologist who decided to put this ultimate UFO mystery to the test. So let's get right into it. Okay, let's dive into this by posing the big central mystery. Is the most famous UFO whistleblower of our time actually lying? Now, if you follow this topic, you already know the lore. But our natural instinct, whenever we're faced with reality-bending claims that completely challenge our understanding of science and our place in the universe, is to ask, wait, is this just a massive hoax? Well, in this explainer, we aren't looking at blurry photos, and we definitely aren't debating aerospace engineering. We're looking strictly at the nonverbal cues, the micro-expressions, and the actual body language of the man at the very center of the storm. To really wrap our heads around this analysis, we have to anchor ourselves in the year 1989. That's the exact year Bob Lazar first went public with his story in a now infamous interview. And he didn't just casually mention some rumor. No, he blew the lid off of a deep black government program. Doing that in 1989 came with some incredibly intense personal repercussions. Speaking out on television essentially painted a massive target right on his own back. He was under immense, palpable stress, literally fearing for his safety and his livelihood. For a behavioral analyst, that kind of environment is absolutely critical. Extreme pressure is exactly when deception cues usually leak out. So the analysis we're unpacking today is based on that exact high-stakes moment when the pressure on him was at its absolute peak. You likely already know his core claims: working at the secret S4 site near Area 51, reverse engineering extraterrestrial spacecraft, advanced propulsion systems powered by Element 115, crafts navigating via gravity waves, and of course the extreme compartmentalized secrecy masking the whole shebang. But I really want you to look at this from a psychologist's perspective for a second. If he's lying, this is an incredibly complex, highly technical web of deceit to try and maintain on live television. Creating and maintaining a fabricated reality with that level of technical jargon and interlocking details, that requires an immense cognitive load. It takes huge mental effort to keep those lies straight, and honestly, that effort almost always spills over into physical tells. Now, as you might expect, these wild claims sparked decades of intense public skepticism. I mean, when you start talking about Element 115 and reverse engineering alien gravity drives, you instantly become a highly polarizing figure. The discourse within both the scientific community and government circles completely fractured. For years, Lazar's assertions have been a lightning rod, and because of that polarization, every eye, every camera, and every critic was out there scrutinizing his every micro-expression. Lots of people dismissed him outright as a fraud or just a conspiracist looking for attention. And this massive wave of skepticism really framed how his story was consumed by the general public for over 30 years. But here is where we completely shift gears. Enter Dr. G. He's the highly credible, grounded expert behind our source material today. He's a clinical and forensic psychologist, a published author, and a total expert in behavioral analysis and the subtle cues of deception. And you know what makes his perspective so incredibly valuable? He does not care about the UFO community's bias. He has absolutely zero stake in whether extraterrestrials exist or not. His only loyalty is to the cold, hard, clinical data of human behavior. He decided to take that highly scrutinized 1989 interview and apply strict professional principles to see if Lazar's story actually holds up under clinical psychological scrutiny. This brings us to a crucial distinction that perfectly captures what this explainer is all about. On one hand, public skepticism traditionally zeroes in on the fringe conspiracies, the sci-fi elements, and, whether the physics involved are actually plausible. But Dr. G's clinical approach, it strips all the aliens and spaceships right out of the equation. He focuses strictly on nonverbal behavior and deception cues. He isn't trying to prove if Element 115 can actually bend gravity, and he certainly isn't confirming that aliens exist. He is purely analyzing the human beings sitting on that tape. It's just an entirely different way of investigating the mystery. So let's slow down a bit and look at how a professional actually does this. Think about how you try to spot when a friend or a coworker is lying to you. Maybe they avoid eye contact or they start fidgeting, right? Well, Dr. G's clinical method is basically the rigorous scientific version of that. First, he observes baseline behavior to establish exactly how Lazar acts, speaks, and moves when he's totally relaxed and just answering non-threatening questions. Then, as the interview hits the wildest, most sensational claims, he searches for nonverbal inconsistencies, basically asking, does that baseline suddenly shift? And finally, he analyzes those shifts for psychological deception cues. We're talking about those subtle, almost imperceptible signals, like sudden changes in blink rate, micro shrugs, or defensive postures that a forensic psychologist is specifically trained to spot when a brain is working overtime to fabricate a lie. And that rigorous clinical process leads us to a pretty startling psychological verdict. After reviewing the tape, Dr. G concludes, and I quote, "Lazar shows no clear signs of deception." Just take a second to think about the immense weight of that statement. Here you have a trained forensic psychologist actively hunting for the classic markers of a liar, the darting eyes, the micro shrugs, the closed-off defensive body language, and he comes up completely empty. Throughout the absolute most mind-bending parts of the interview, Lazar maintains consistent eye contact and a very open, relaxed posture. This conclusion completely stuns the traditional skeptical mindset. I mean, it directly challenges decades of assumption that Lazar was simply spinning this massive, fabricated web of lies. Now, what's really interesting about this finding is the incredible paradox it creates. Whether you personally believe his claims or not, his nonverbal behavior is shockingly consistent with someone telling the truth. We literally have a man describing physics-defying extraterrestrial technology, and yet his physical cadence, his facial expressions, and his micro-movements never betray a lie. According to Dr. G's analysis, the subtle cues that make this interview so compelling suggest one unavoidable fact. Bob Lazar, at the very least, genuinely believes every single word he is saying. His brain is simply not processing this information as a falsehood. And of course, these claims didn't just stay buried in 1989. Thanks to filmmaker Jeremy Corbell and Joe Rogan bringing the story back to the masses through the Joe Rogan Experience and a dedicated documentary, millions of modern eyes have scrutinized Lazar all over again. What started as a highly controversial, localized TV interview has totally evolved into this massive global conversation. It's resurfaced to a brand new audience, and it's shifted the debate from just fringe conspiracy to much broader, more serious implications about government secrecy and what might actually be hidden out there in the Nevada desert. So, this forensic analysis leaves us with a staggering reality: zero deception cues. His behavior seamlessly aligns with honesty, which means we are forced to ask the ultimate question. If his body language isn't lying, what is the truth? Is it actually possible that the unbelievable is real? Or is the human mind capable of believing a fiction so deeply that even a highly trained forensic psychologist cannot spot the lie? This clinical perspective doesn't just solve the mystery, it deepens it entirely. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep questioning everything, and I hope this look at the evidence leaves you just as curious as I am.